اللهم صل على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما صليت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. اللهم بارك على محمد وعلى آل محمد كما باركت على إبراهيم وعلى آل إبراهيم إنك حميد مجيد. بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم. Ibn Abbas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "There are four qualities which if a person has been bestowed with them, he has been bestowed with the best of this world and the hereafter. They are, number 1, a grateful heart. Number 2, a tongue that is engaged in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu. Number 3, a body that is patient at times of calamities. Number 4, a wife who does not commit a sin with regard to herself, for example, her chastity, and his husband's wealth." Mentioned by Tabarani. Abu Darda radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Not a single day and night passes without Allah Jalla Jalaluhu having a favor and aid which He bestows to whomever He wills from His servants. And Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has not favored any servant with anything more superior than inspiring him to engage in His remembrance." Mentioned by Tabarani. Hanzala al-Usaidi radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "I take an oath in the name of the being in whose control is my life, if your condition remains as it is when you are in my presence, and you remain in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu all the time, the angels would embrace you while you are on your beds and while you are on the streets. But O Hanzala, this condition does not remain all the time." He said this 3 times. This means that a person's condition does not remain the same all the time. Rather, it changes according to circumstances. Mentioned by Muslim. Muaz ibn Jabal radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "The inhabitants of paradise will not express any remorse except for the time which elapsed wherein they did not engage in the remembrance of Allah." Mentioned by Tabarani. Sahal ibn Hunayf radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "Fulfill the rights of the assemblies. One of them is to remain in the abundant remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu." Mentioned by Tabarani. Uqba ibn Amir radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "When a traveler turns his attention away from worldly matters and turns towards the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, an angel most certainly accompanies him. When he turns his attention to poetry and other useless activities, Shaitan most certainly accompanies him." Mentioned by Tabarani. Abu Musa radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, "The similitude of the person who remembers Allah and the one who does not is like that of the living and the dead." Mentioned by Bukhari. A narration of Muslim Rahimahullah states, "The similitude of the house in which Allah is remembered and the house in which He is not remembered is like that of the living and the dead." Muaz radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates, with regard to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam, a person asked us, "Which muhajideen shall receive the greatest reward?" He replied, "Those who engage in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu the most." He asked, "Which fasting people shall receive the greatest reward?" He replied, "Those who engage in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu the most." He then asked about Salah, Zakah, Hajj and charity, and each time the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "Those who engage in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu the most." On hearing this, Abu Bakr radiallahu ta'ala anhu said to Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu, "O Abu Hafs, those who engage in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu have taken all the good." The Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam said, "Indeed." Mentioned by Ahmed. Note: Abu Hafs in the kunyat nomen of Umar radiallahu ta'ala anhu. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the Mufarrid people have gone far ahead. The companions radiallahu ta'ala anhum asked, who are the Mufarrid people, O Messenger of Allah? He replied, those who have completely immersed themselves in the remembrance of Allah. This remembrance will lighten their burden, and so they will be very light on the day of the resurrection. Mentioned by Tirmidhi. Abu Musa radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, if there is a person who has dirhams in his lap which he is distributing, and another who is engaged in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, the one who is engaged in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu is superior. Mentioned by Tabarani. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, the person who engages in the abundant remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has freed himself from hypocrisy. Mentioned by Tabarani. Abu Sa'id al-Khudri radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, there are many people who engage in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu while lying down on soft comfortable beds. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu shall admit them into the lofty levels of paradise by virtue of his remembrance. Mentioned by Abu Ya'la. Jabir ibn Samurah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates, when the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam completed the Fajr Salah, he would sit cross-legged until the sun rose considerably. Mentioned by Abu Dawud. Anas radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, I prefer sitting with people who are engaged in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu from the Fajr Salah till sunrise, to freeing 4 people from the progeny of Ismail alayhi salam. I prefer sitting with people who are engaged in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu from the Asr Salah till sunset, to freeing 4 people. Mentioned by Abu Dawud. The progeny of Ismail alayhi salam is mentioned because they are the most superior and most noble of Arab tribes, and therefore the most valuable. Abu Hurairah radiallahu ta'ala anhu narrates that the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam said, Allah Jalla Jalaluhu has angels moving about on the path seeking the people of zikr. When they find a people engaging in the remembrance of Allah Jalla Jalaluhu, they call out to each other, go and fulfill your needs. They then surround them with their wings till they reach the lowest heaven. Their sustainer, who knows best about them, asks them, what are my servants saying? They reply, they are glorifying you, speaking of your greatness, praising you, and exalting you. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu asks, have they seen me? They reply, no. By Allah, they have not seen you. He asks, what if they were to see me? They reply, if they were to see you, they would be more ardent in their worship of you, more intense in your exaltation, and they would glorify you more abundantly. He asked, what are they saying? What are they asking for? They reply, they are asking you for paradise. He asked, have they seen it? They reply, no. By Allah, they have not seen it. He asked, what if they were to see it? They reply, if they were to see it, they would be more desirous of it. Their quest for it would be more intense, and their yearning for it would be greater. He asked, from what are they seeking refuge? They reply, they are seeking refuge from the hellfire. He asked, have they seen it? They reply, no. By Allah, they have not seen it. He asked, what if they were to see it? They reply, if they were to see it, they would flee from it more swiftly, and their fear of it would be more intense. He says, I make you witness to the fact that I have forgiven them. One of the angels says, there is such and such person among them, he is not part of them. He merely came there for some work. Allah Jalla Jalaluhu replies, there are such companions that even the one sitting with them is not deprived. Mentioned by Bukhari. May Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala give us the tawfiq to make amal upon whatever we have listened to, and may He give us the tawfiq to send this to others, inshallah. Subhanallah bihamdihi, subhanakallahumma bihamdika, nashhadu an la ilaha illa ant, nastaghfiruka wa natubu ilayh.